Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. In this video, I want to talk about something very serious, and there's nothing more serious than being outside of CPAP's entrance, obviously, because we all know that CPAP is the hardest boss in the entire game. Alright, all jokes aside, this is going to be a video about Oz rings. I'm sure you've heard lots about Oz rings like Ring of Restraint, Continuous Ring, Totaling Ring, Weapon Jump Ring. What are these rings? What do they do? How do you get them? Why are they important? How do you upgrade them? All of that information will be in this video. Now, let's first talk about what are Oz rings and why are they even called Oz rings? Like, where's the word Oz? Like, what does that even mean? It's called Weapon Jump S, Totaling Ring, Continuous Ring. What are these, bro? Like, these, you get them from these ring boxes. What are these ring box, jade box rings? Why are they not called jade rings? Well, the reason why they're called Oz rings is because for many years, the only way to get those rings is from doing something in the game called Tower of Oz. Now, you do not have to do this content anymore. This content is old. It doesn't do anything anymore. You used to be able to get your Oz rings from doing this, but you do not do that to get your Oz rings anymore. You cannot get any of these rings from doing the Tower of Oz anymore. So this is just completely useless now. But because for many years, this was the only way to get these rings, people still call them to this day Oz rings. So let's talk about what these Oz rings do. To keep it very simple, there are many different types of Oz rings that you could see in my inventory. I have Ring of Restraint, Continuous Ring, Totaling Ring, Weapon Jump Ring, Risk Taker, Crisis HM, Ultimatum Ring, Health Cut. Like, there's so many different types, right? What do they do? To keep it very simple, they give you a buff that lasts a certain amount of time. So each ring gives you some sort of enhancement. Some are really good, some are really bad. And there are a few rings that are very strong that basically everyone wants to get. And in particular, it's these three rings: Weapon Jump Ring, Continuous Ring, and Ring of Restraint. These are the three main rings that everybody tries to get. They're the best ones. And the rings also come at different levels. Like, you could see this one is at level 1, this one's level 4, this one's level 3. And the level of the ring determines how strong the buff is. So a level 4 ring will give you a bigger buff than a level 1 ring. Not only that, sometimes the level of the ring determines the duration of the buff too. So for example, for this Ring of Restraint, the buff would last for 15 seconds at level 4, but at level 2, it would last for 11 seconds, and it would be a smaller buff. So you can see that getting a higher level ring is very important, and it makes you much stronger. So to use these types of rings, you just equip them. And when you equip them in your beginner tab, you're going to see that you are going to have two new skills. You're going to have the Ring of Restraint ability, and you're going to have the Ring Activation. Now, the reason why you want Ring Activation over just the regular Ring of Restraint is because if you have Ring Activation keybound, no matter what ring you switch to, the keybind will automatically switch to that ring, as you can see on the bottom right. Whereas if I just had Ring of Restraint, like the skill itself activated, if I were to switch to a different key, it wouldn't actually automatically switch to keybind. So it's better to always have the Ring Activation keybound. That way I could switch to whatever ring I want and the keybind will automatically switch. Now let's talk about how you get these rings. So you get the rings from clearing bosses, and bosses starting at Akechi and beyond will drop these things called jade boxes. So jade boxes, there are different types of them. There's the green one, the red one, the black one, and the white one. And depending on what ring box you get, you have a higher chance of getting a really good ring. So if we open this boss content tab in the guide, you'll see that when you clear Akechi, he'll drop a green jade ring box. I'm going to have it linked below, all of the rates, because there's rates at which you can get the rings. There's a chart that you can look at that tells you what are the odds of you getting every single ring from every type of boss. But you'll see that normal Akechi, normal Lomian, not CPAP, drops these green jade boxes. So even at a pretty low damage point, you can start getting these basic Oz rings. You won't be able to get level 4 rings. If you hover over it, it says between level 1 and level 3. But you can still get really strong from having a level 3 ring if you get lucky. But the chances of these dropping is very low, and the chances to get a ring box are increased with drop gear. So even if you're not the one breaking the box, like let's say you're in a hard lucid party and the party leader breaks the box, you should always be in full drop gear because it increases the chance of you getting a ring box. And the higher tier the boss, the higher chance that the boxes will drop. So it's pretty unlikely that you'll get a good ring from these basic lower tier bosses. But once you start clearing higher tier bosses like Hard Lomi drops a red jade box, so you can start getting level 4 rings. Once you're at Chaos Guardian Angel Slime, you can get a black jade box, which has an even higher chance of getting good rings. Like you have a higher chance to get Ring of Restraint, and like the weak bad rings are like slightly filtered out. And once you start clearing Black Mage, Hard Saren, Easy Callus, and beyond, you'll get the white jade box, which has the highest chance of dropping, and you can only get level 3 or level 4 rings from this. So once you're at the point where you're doing Black Mage, Hard Saren, it's going to be very likely that you get at least one usable ring, because it's a minimum of level 3 or level 4 ring. So usually what I've found for most people is they'll start getting their rings, their really good rings, once they start doing Black Mage, Hard Saren every week, and the chances just increase. If you start clearing Kaling as well, Kalos, Extreme Lotus, all of these bosses, they'll just drop white ring boxes every single week. If you look at my equip inventory, you'll see that at this point in the game, I have mostly white jade ring boxes. I have 15 of these, 9 black jade boxes, and 6 red ones. So that just goes to show that when you get further and further into the game, you get more of the really, really good ones versus the really, really bad ones. I have 0 green ones because the only bosses that drop green ones are the more baby bosses like Normal Lomian and Akechi. I don't run Normal Lomian. I do Extreme Lotus and Hard Damien. So I won't even have a chance to get the green one. So as you get stronger, the chances of getting really good rings actually increases, which is a really good rewarding system. Now let's talk about what these rings actually do. So we're going to go over what the main rings do because they're the most important ones, and I don't think talking about like an ultimatum ring really does anything. You might ask, why do you even have this? I just have it because it's cool. That's it. It doesn't really do anything. It's not really useful. So I'll talk about the main rings that everybody's looking for. And let's start with Ring of Restraint, which is the most talked about ring, the Roar ring. That's how people refer it to. So basically Ring of Restraint, what it does is if you equip it and you hover over it, it's going to say HP cost 600, duration 15 seconds, so it lasts 15 seconds, and you gain 100% attack and magic attack for 15 seconds. So that's the same as your weapon pot, your secondary pot, your emblem, like that percent attack. You will gain plus another 100% for 15 seconds. But keep in mind, that's at level 4. At level 4, it's this amount. If it's level 3, 2, or 1, it'll be a less amount and less duration. So having this be at a high level is very, very important. You get significantly stronger every time you get a higher level ring. The catch in using Ring of Restraint is that it creates a zone around you. And this zone, if you were to leave the zone, the buff immediately goes away. I still have, 7, 6, 5, but if I leave the zone, it instantly goes away. So it locks you kind of in place and you cannot move in that area too much or else you lose the buff. So that's the catch in using Ring of Restraint. The next ring that's very, very important is the Weapon Jump ring. This is also a very, very strong ring. And usually you use this on your mini burst, or if you're a bishop, it's super important because this weapon jump ring, there's one for each stat. It increases the amount of stat that you have by a tremendous amount. So right now I'm at 67k strength, right? How this ring works is it increases your stat by a certain percentage based off of your weapon attack. Now this also works for Demon Avengers. It just scales it differently. So you see how it says increases strength by 400% of your equipped main weapon's attack power or magic attack. So what that means is if you're using a weapon that has a lot of attack on it, like for example, my Genesis weapon, it says attack power plus 750 because I have a really good flame and it's at 22 stars. So it'll increase my stat, like since I use strength, by 400% of that value. So that's a lot. That's a big buff. And it'll increase it for 15 seconds. But the cool thing about Weapon Jump is it's server-sided, so it's usually longer than 15 seconds because there's a bit of lag on the skill. Now, this is obviously super important for classes that scale, like their skills scale extra with int, like Lin or Bishop. But this isn't as effective on classes that have less of a very high attack on their weapon. Like a Night Lord's Claw, for example, doesn't have as much base attack, so it doesn't benefit from Weapon Jump rings as much. But a class like Hado will benefit a lot from a Weapon Jump. So if we were to use the Weapon Jump, I'm at 67k strength right now. If I use it, I'm at 86k strength for over 15 seconds. 86k. It jumps me up so much. So my damage just increased way more while it's active. But once it goes away, then I'm going to go back to 67k. You can see it lasts quite a bit longer than 15 seconds. Now, the next ring that is very important is called the continuous ring. Now, this is somewhat of a new ring. If maybe you're a little bit of an older player and you remember Oz rings and you don't know what this one is somewhat newer. Now, the continuous ring is very, very good for DPS classes. That's something like Demon Avenger, Lin, or something like Blaster, where these classes that have a lot of DPS, a lot of continuous damage, fire, poison as well, continuous ring is super, super strong. The two rings that we mentioned before, Ring of Restraint and Weapon Jump, are good for burst scenarios because it gives you a short duration, super powerful buff, whereas the continuous ring gives you a long duration, not as strong buff. So how the continuous ring works is when you equip it, you actually have to wait 2 minutes for the ring to actually activate. So it says preparation time 120 seconds. The reason why that exists is so that you can't do something like you do your big origin burst in Ring of Restraint and then you immediately switch to continuous ring until your next burst is up. They don't want you to do that in the game, so they set a 2-minute preparation time. But what it does is at level 4, keep in mind if it's a lower level ring, the values are less. It gives you 140% boss damage, 10% attack and magic attack for 8 seconds. And during that 8 seconds, you have that big buff, but then for 4 seconds after that, that buff is on cooldown. So basically 66% of the time when you have this ring on, you gain plus 140% boss damage and plus 10% attack and magic attack. So you can see it's almost done off cooldown, and let's go hit a target. It doesn't work when mobbing, so we actually have to go hit a boss. So if we hit Balrog here, you'll see that I'm at 381 boss, but once we hit it, the continuous ring activates, and now I'm at 521 boss, and I gained a bunch of attack. And you'll see that on the top right, you can see when it's active, and now it's on cooldown. And if I were to keep hitting Balrog, it activates again for 8 seconds. But once that 8-second timer goes away, then it's on cooldown. But once the cooldown goes away, it activates again. And you can also see it on the bottom where the hotkeys are, so you don't have to look at your buff bar. So it's a very interesting ring. It's really, really good for DPS classes, but it's not so good for super burst heavy classes or classes that have like 2 good bursts, like Haido, for example. You would rather use a Ring of Restraint and Weapon Jump ring if you have them both. You would swap between them mid-boss. So those are like the 3 main rings. Now, the rest of the rings I'm going to talk about are like either conditional or have very niche use cases. So the next ring I want to talk about is the Risk Taker ring. I don't have a level 4 version of this ring, but I don't need it because Haido doesn't use this ring. But certain classes like Aran that has Freud's Wisdom can actually utilize this ring. So this ring is similar to the Ring of Restraint, where it gives you an attack % buff. So for me, it's 40% attack, but if it was a level 4 ring, it would be 50% attack. If you remember, Ring of Restraint gave 100%, this one will give 50% at level 4. But the way that this ring works is the duration of the buff is way longer. So at level 4, it would be a 30-second buff that gives you half as much attack % as a Ring of Restraint. But the catch is, if you take any amount of damage, if you get hit by anything at all, the buff instantly goes away. So just as the name implies, it is a risk taker ring. So that's why classes like Aran that have Freud's Wisdom, that iframes them for 30 seconds, it could be really useful because you're iframed for 30 seconds, you can get the full duration of this ring. But for most people, it's not really useful, or maybe in dojo, certain floors don't hit you, you can utilize it. But dojo, really the best thing for it is continuous ring. Next ring that is useful in some scenarios is the totaling ring. So the totaling ring increases your stat by 2% of the sum of all of your stats. So for example, it adds up all of your stats, strength, int, dex, luck, combines it, and then 2% of that number, you get that added to your main stat. So you could kind of think of it as like a worse weapon jump, essentially, for most people. Certain classes like Xenon would benefit a lot more from this, but because Xenon is like a 3-minute burst class, then you would usually use Ring of Restraint only on Xenon. But if I were to use it, you can see my stat went to 78k from 67k. So the weapon jump gave me way more, but this one gives you a decent amount as well. So it's still useful in some niche scenarios, like if you're a 2-minute burst class and you want to use it on your third 2-minute burst or certain dojo floors. The last useful ring that I want to talk about is the Crisis HM ring. Now this ring is pretty weird because this Crisis HM ring actually gives you the exact same buff that Ring of Restraint gives you. So if I were to put on the Crisis HM, it says attack and magic attack plus 100%, 15-second duration, but there is no restriction like the Ring of Restraint where it creates a zone around me, and if I leave the zone, I lose the buff. If you manage to actually use the Crisis HM ring, you will get that exact same buff, but you could run around and not worry about losing it. And it's also affected by server lag, so it lasts longer than Ring of Restraint. So technically, this would be the biggest buff for burst out of all the rings if you can pull it off. Now, the reason why I say if you can pull it off is because the condition to activate it is very difficult. It activates when your HP and MP are 5% or lower. So the reason why that's so difficult is because how are you supposed to get your HP and MP to 5% while you have this on, right? That's where these two rings come in, Limit Ring and Health Cut Ring. The Limit Ring, what it does is it makes it so that your MP cut is 500 only. Like your max MP is just 500. So obviously this is useless on its own. And then the Health Cut Ring, what it does is it lowers your health by 70%. And this value changes depending on the level of the ring as well. So if you were to use both of these rings, Health Cut, Limit Ring, and then you put on Crisis HM, you could potentially lower your health and MP low enough to proc this. So I'm going to try to do it. With certain classes, it's a lot easier to do because they have stuff like Last Resort that costs HP. But with other classes that don't have a lot of skills that cost HP, it's very difficult to pull off and is not really realistic. Something like Dual Blade and Night Lord can benefit from this, but a lot of other classes won't be able to. So I'm going to use Health Cut, I'm going to use Limit Ring, and I'm going to put Crisis HM on, use some skills that cost mana, and you'll see that the Crisis HM ring procced because I lowered my HP and MP that low. And now I have that big giant buff that gives me plus 100% attack power. So I managed to pull it off by using Solar Crest. Could have used True Arachnid Reflection as well, Hyper Body, and Will of Verta because these skills all cost % HP. And I managed to get the buff off. So in some very niche scenarios, you could like hyper min max and actually get this ring off, but obviously the risk is if you take any damage in the process or your auto pot triggers or something, or you have lifesteal, then it's very unlikely to be able to trigger. But those are the main rings. Now the last thing that I want to talk about is upgrading your ring. So far you've only seen level 4 rings, but there's actually a level 5 ring that you can get that makes all of the rings that are able to get to level 5 much stronger. So level 4 is the max that you can get naturally through boxes, but you can actually upgrade it to level 5. So there's this item in the game called a Grindstone of Life. To get this item, you have to kill some pretty deep in the game bosses. You have to start killing Kalos and Kaling. And in the future, there's probably going to be more bosses that drop them. But Kalos and Kaling drop these Grindstones of Life. And if you hover over it, it says eligible items, Ring of Restraint level 4, Continuous Ring level 4, Risk Taker, Weapon Jump, Totaling Crit Damage. All of these types of rings, you need them at level 4, and then you could use a Grindstone on them. And how the Grindstone works is you put your level 4 ring on the left side, and you put the Grindstone in the middle, and there is a very small chance that the ring could be upgraded to a level 5 ring. Now, it also costs a lot of mesos, 500 mil, and the success chance is only 10%. But you can actually increase that success chance up to 50% if you put in 5 grindstones instead of just 1 grindstone. So you could either stack up a bunch of grindstones and put them 5 at a time, and then you have a 50% chance to succeed, and it would cost a lot more mesos, or you could do 1 grindstone at a time. Everybody just does 1 grindstone at a time because the odds of success are all the same. And if you happen to succeed, then maybe you could do another ring after that instead of spending all 5 on 1 ring. But the odds are super low. Not many people have level 5 rings, and getting these grindstones are extremely rare. It's almost like a pitch drop rate. It's super, super low chance to get one. But what it does for the rings is it increases the duration of them. So for Ring of Restraint, instead of it lasting 15 seconds, it would actually last 20 seconds, extra 5 seconds. That's a massive amount of time. Weapon Jump, it would last longer as well. Continuous Ring is a little different. It actually gets stronger. Like the buff gives you more boss damage and more attack percent, whereas the other rings, it would just increase the duration, which is pretty cool. Now, the last part of this video I want to say is what ring should you be getting? Now, at the end of the day, by the time you reach endgame and as you progress through this game, you'll probably get at least 2 good rings, or most likely all of the rings at some point. Just from bossing and playing the game, you'll get them. There's nothing you have to do that like immediately is like, okay, I need to go get these rings. I need to start grinding for it. You can't really grind for it. You just do your bosses and hope that you get it, and eventually you will. And the further you get into the game, the higher the chance of getting it becomes, because you start getting white jade boxes, which have the highest chance of getting something good. So what I'm going to do as a little reward for everybody who stayed this long is I'm going to open one of each ring. And I want you to try and think of which rings I'm going to get. So I'm going to open the red jade box. I think I'm going to get a Risk Taker 2. That's my guess. Let's see if I get any right. Crisis HM1. Okay, useless. Goodbye. All right. Black jade box. I think I'm going to get a Risk Taker 2. Let's just say Risk Taker 2 again. Ring of Restraint 2. Oh my god, bro. Okay, goodbye. Now, also, that makes me want to mention that even if you get a level 2 ring, like a Ring of Restraint 2, it could still be usable. Like, it could still be definitely usable for your burst, because you still get 50% attack for 11 seconds. It's still probably better than just a random 17-star ring. All right, now I'm going to open the white jade box, which only can give me a level 3 or level 4 ring. Fuck it, I'm going to say I'm going to get a continuous 4. Okay, I got a crit damage 4. Hey, you know what? Actually, I actually don't have a crit damage 4. Or I don't have a crit damage ring at all, so whatever, I'll take it. I got a new ring. So just to be short, people probably going to ask about crit damage. It's not really useful, but essentially when you use it, it just gives you 28% crit damage for 50 seconds. Maybe in some edge cases in dojo it's useful, but that's it. That's the only thing. If you got to this point of the video, thank you for watching, by the way. And I also want you to say the word crisis. I want you to say the word crisis so I know you watched the whole thing and you're the GOAT. Obviously, if you have any questions, leave a comment and I'll probably get back to you. I do read all the comments. If you want to consider helping me out, then subscribe to the video, share the video. Maybe you could teach somebody about Oz rings, pull up to my Twitch channel where you could have fun with me live. And with that all being said, have a wonderful day. Shout out to my members, Blazefire, Shooms, Shagad, Ravi Espa, Koga, Piconir, Jesse B, Dante Victory, CK, Prelman, J, and Blunt Poppy Supreme Oil Backwards. I appreciate you guys so much and have a great day.